They need to get you there.
Exactly.
Right. It's like a fast track to productivity.
Okay. So on Monday, we talked a little bit more about PHP. We got into writing functions in PHP, loading files in PHP, and also doing what are called includes. So we talked about arrays as well. For each loop is super useful. Functions and calling them. We talked a little bit about variable scope and how variable scope inside of PHP functions is a little bit different. You have to actually explicitly import a variable into the local scope using the global keyword. We talked about loading files. What's the main difference between the file function and the file get contents function? Those are the two main ways of loading a file. Yeah.
File returns every when it's a string,
Mm-hmm.
right? File get contents returns the whole thing as a string.
Right. So he said file get contents returns the whole thing as a string, and file returns the contents split up into an array of the lines of the file. Excellent. And glob, what does glob do? Anybody remember that one? Returns it as an array. Well, so it, yeah.
They return specific directory.
Yeah, so it allows you to specify a sort of wildcard sort of search string for the files that you'd like to, the names of files you'd like to get back. So it allows you to search directories. You can actually search more than one directory if you use multiple wildcards. But it allows you to figure out what files are in the file system in a particular folder and like get the contents, the files in that particular folder. So it allows you to list files, basically. Okay. We talked about list for unpacking an array into specific variables, splitting and joining strings with explode and implode. And let's see. And we talked about include. Include is used for including shared code. So one of the things we really don't like is redundancy, right? So if we have redundant code, if we have multiple pages that use a lot of the same HTML or very, very similar HTML, we can factor out that similar HTML into a file, which we then include from two different places, or 10 different places if we have 10 different pages on our website. And that's what we do with include. Okay. And our example from Thursday, I'm just going to go back to that real quick and do a couple more things. We're still working on the beer blog. I'm going to go to beer.php. We've done a couple of different things here. We added a version number. We parameterized the city names. We loaded the cities from a file called cities.txt. And this had information about when they started their chapter and the number of members. Of course, my apartment is the newest one, and it only has one member right now. And we factored out some redundant code into separate files. So like the header.php file contains all of the beginning HTML code and so on. I'll just add a couple of different things to this file. Let's do like beer.php. Let's do so I wanted to do like let's do a visitor message. You are the 10,000th visitor to visit this page or something. So let's do like one of those messages. Let's do that like here. Let's do it here. Welcome. You are the something-th visitor to this page. Actually, what I want to do is I want to make this. Let's sort of fake it. We're going to make a fake number counter. We're going to just do a random number between 1 and like 10,000. How's that? So I'm going to output that here. I'm going to say welcome message, and I'm going to create the welcome message somewhere up here. I'm going to say welcome message equals this, and I want to inject some random number into here. So maybe I'll just say visitor number equals, how do I generate a random number? Anybody remember how to do that? It's just a function, it's called rand. You might be tempted to do something like math.random or something, but that's Java and JavaScript, so don't do that here. Just rand, and you can pass in a parameter between 1 and 10,000, let's say. So visitor num. So I want to inject visitor num into here due to PHP's string interpolation. The fact that this is double quoted allows me to inject a variable directly in here, right? So visitor num. Is that right? What's wrong with this? What's that?
You need the, less than, greater than, you need the question mark, equal symbol.
Well, so we can't directly inject this into the page because the th is interfering with this. PHP thinks that the variable is called visitor numph, which there is no variable called visitor numph. There's a variable called visitor num, but in order to explicitly say that this is the name of the variable in PHP, we enclose that with curly braces. You don't normally have to enclose it with curly braces, only if you're injecting it into a string, and only if you need to disambiguate. So only if you need to, because like if there's a space here, PHP is just going to say, oh, well, a space isn't part of a variable name, so that's fine. It'll know that it's just called visitor num. It's just the fact that there's these characters after it that could be part of a variable name that interferes with it. Okay. My notes real quick. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to put the navigation. The navigation nowadays is often both at the top and the bottom of the page. So I want to do that. I want to put the navigation type stuff up here. I want to put that also at the bottom of the page. So let's do that. Where did we? Let's see. We have. Oops. What are we looking at here? Oh, the header.php is what includes all of the header type stuff, and that includes the navigation, and that outputs the navigation. So we have this function that we use to output the navigation because it was sort of a large chunk of code, and we wanted to make it a little bit nicer. So we put that in a function. That we put in this shared file here called functions.php. It's a common thing to put functions all together in a separate file. So this outputs the navigation at the top of the page. Maybe we'll add the navigation to the bottom of the page as well. So we'll put it on all pages by putting in footer.php. So at the end of the section here, maybe we can add a footer. And in here, we can say output nav again. Okay, so we've got the navigation down there again. It looks funky because it's still got the same CSS applied to it that spaces it down from the top and from the left and so on. But I guess that looks okay for now. Okay. All right, that's all I wanted to do for that. Let's move on to today's material. Now we start to get into the little bit more sophisticated uses of PHP. So we're going to start looking today at what are called forms and parameterizing the page. Parameters of a page are particularly useful, and we're going to talk about what it means to submit information and receive that information in a PHP script. So parameterized pages are very, very common on the web. You might not even notice how common they are. A lot of data on the web, oftentimes on the web you need to supply information to a website in order for it to give you information that you request. For example, Google. You go visit Google and you type in information. I visit Google. And Google has this area where I can type information. As soon as I click on that, it accepts input. I can type something, and it will display results. The URLs in Google have changed recently, but it used to be that you could just do something like this, and it actually will do the same thing. So google.com/search Q equals Russian River. So the Q equals Russian River has filled in this field here, and the result of that is that the results that are being displayed are for Russian River. If I change this to Georgetown Brewing, then the results switch to results for Georgetown Brewing. So this is a program. Search is a program. It doesn't have a file extension like we would normally expect, but this search is a program which is responsible for accepting certain input from the user and generating output based on that input. So we need a way to supply that input, supply that information, and it turns out this field that we saw initially is the way that we supply that. Once we type in Russian River, Google has a little bit of fanciness going on now where it automatically adjusts the page and it automatically fetches information without you having to even do anything. But it used to be that if you just visited that page, you would type stuff in, you would hit enter, it would visit a new page, and your query parameter would appear up here. It would switch from that to search Q equals Russian River. So the field is how we accepted that input. Lots of pages on the web do this. Order forms, search things, you know, I don't know. There's tons of data being exchanged on the web. I need to supply information to a particular website. I do that oftentimes by using what are called query parameters, those things that we saw in the URL. And so that's what these are, query string parameters. So everything after the question mark in a URL is called the query string. So all of this stuff after here, all of this stuff after here, that's called the query string. And each one of these is called a parameter. So Q equals Romney, that's a parameter. Username equals step, that's a parameter. ID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's a parameter. So each of these is a name value pair that I'm supplying to the program that's going to presumably read these. So search is a program, it's going to receive these as input. Student login.php is a program that's going to receive these as input and do something with them. And in PHP, we can look at these parameters using special arrays. These are special, what are called super global arrays. That means that you can use them anywhere in the file. You don't have to explicitly import them using the global keyword. They're just available everywhere. There's this one called _get, and there's also another one called _post. We'll look at that more on Friday. For now, we're pretty much just going to be using get. And what this does is, this is a special associative array. Associative arrays are sort of like, in different languages they're called different things. They're called like hashes or dictionaries or whatever. It's like an array, except it's indexed based on a string or some other data type instead of just an index, just a numeric index. So I'm mapping to the username keyword, I'm mapping the value that was supplied for that. So back here, username equals step. If I want to get the value step, I say get bracket username. That gives me the value step. Get bracket ID, that gives me the value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That was associated with the ID parameter. So username equals get username, ID number equals get ID. We're casting that to an int just to make sure that it is an int value. Eats meat equals false. If is set get meat, so I'm checking in this step. I'm using the isSet function to check whether this value exists. So back here, I only supplied these two parameters. I could optionally supply a third parameter, ampersand, what is it, meet, ampersand meet equals false, or meet equals true or something. And if I supplied that, then it would override this value for each meet equals false and make it true. So we have this $_get superglobal associative array, which is very useful. And we also have this isSet function, which we often use to see whether a parameter was passed. We see whether the meet index of this associative array was set. PHP automatically takes care of this get. It automatically parses the query string and puts its keys and values into this associative array. So we're just checking to see whether that value is set. Okay. URLs, you might have noticed that back here when I was doing this little test up here, I switched from using Russian River to Georgetown. And I put a plus in here instead of a space. That's a common thing on the web. Spaces are not usually allowed in URLs. And at some point they just decided the convention would be that a plus would represent a space. If you want to actually represent a plus, or if you have to include any other special special characters in a URL, they have to be encoded. So they have to be represented using an encoded sequence instead of the actual character itself. So spaces, slashes, =, ampersand, slash, equals, and ampersand are used in URLs. They're special characters in URLs. So if you need to use those, you're going to have to escape them. This is an example of, an apostrophe gets converted to %27, exclamation mark, question mark, those get converted to %3f, %21. All of the escape sequences are % followed by a hexadecimal sequence. So you'll oftentimes see that. We won't actually need to deal with this very much because PHP automatically unconverts them back into the original characters. So, but you'll often see these in URLs.
So which search does that do?
Which search does this do? This is just an example
I'm
of.
sure that all of those aren't automatically assumed. The computer itself, the exporter does that.
So the browser. So if you enter something special into the browser, so if I say like something like this, I put a bunch of special characters in there. Firefox. Okay, it's not doing it right now. It's what it's going to do is it's actually behind the scenes. Let's open up Firebug. Firebug. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. No, it's not showing it to me escaped. But when it submits this request here, it's going to submit it using the escape sequences. It's showing me the original characters instead of the escaped characters. But when it actually submits it to Google.com, it'll submit these characters escaped. I think it's a common thing now for web browsers to show the unescaped characters instead of the escaped ones. Okay. As an example of a program that receives parameters, this is just a super simple example which computes the value of exponents given the base and the exponent. It computes the result. So bait equals $get base, exp equals $get exponent, results equals pow. Pow is the mathematical function that allows us to raise the base to an exponent. We compute the results. We print base caret exp equals result. And we're outputting the base, the exponent, and the result calculated. Another example, printing all of the parameters that were submitted to this file. This is a very useful thing to do. We have a for each loop here, and for each loops get slightly modified if you're using them with an associative array. An associative array has keys and values, not just indices and values. So that we can iterate over the get associative array as param, and then we've got this little arrow here, this little double arrow with equals, greater than, and then value. So this will be a key, this will be a value, and then we can say parameter, the name. The param is the key, and the value is the value. We can say param has value. So if we pass in name equals Marty Step and SID equals 15567, it'll end up printing parameter name has value Marty Step, parameter SID is value that. Another thing that you can do is you can just call print R. Print R is a very useful debugging function. And Veridump is very similar. Just say print R and pass in $_get, and it'll print all the contents of that. Okay, so let's do some parameterizing of our page here. Maybe instead of having a random visitor, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll say if there's a parameter passed, then I'll accept that parameter and use that for the random visitor number. Otherwise, I'll just default to some random number. So, so we allow the user, if they pass a particular parameter that they might not know about, we allow them to override this number. So we can say, how do we check to see whether this parameter was passed? Is set. So we can say if is set get brackets, and what do we want to call the parameter? We can. It's sort of up to us what we call it. We can say visitors, maybe. Then we can say visitor num. We'll call it visitor. Visitor num equals get visitor. Else, we'll just generate a random number. So, if we go back, this is our page, right? Okay. So every time we refresh the page, we see that it's a new random number. But if we supply a particular number, we can say question mark visitor equals 3. I'm the 3rd visitor to this page. Excellent. What else could we do? What else do you want to parameterize on this page? How about if we? So we're singing the club song here, and we can adjust the number of bottles that we're referring to. Why don't we parameterize that? Let's so we'll make this, instead of hard coding at 50, we'll make it customizable. Actually, what I'll do is I'll say num bottles. And then up at the top, I'll sort of set number of bottles. And I'll do the same thing. If is set get bottles, then I'll say num bottles equals get bottles. Else, if it's not set, then I'm going to default to something. I'll say num bottles equals 99. 99 is the sort of traditional number for the song, so we'll default to that. So refresh the page. It was on 50 before, now it's on 99 because we defaulted to 99. And then if I want to change it, and bottles equals 3. 3 bottles of beer. Okay. So I parameterize that as well. What else can we do? Let's. Oh, I know what we can do. I want to make this, instead of regular beer, I want to make this light beer. And in order to do that, I'm gonna apply a style sheet to the page to make it appear much lighter. So what I can actually do is I can, over in the header over here, where I link to the style sheet, I can actually link to a different style sheet optionally if a particular parameter is passed. So I can say if is set get light I don't know why anybody would ever drink light beer, but whatever. Then I can link style sheet lightbeer.css. Okay. And then in my lightbeer.css, I can say something like body opacity 0.5, background color orange, make it a little bit lighter hue, and light. Okay, that made it a little bit too, let's make it 0.25. No, I want to go the other way, 0.75. That's a little too much. Okay, that's fine. So I've made the page light by passing this light parameter. If I remove the light parameter, and you'll notice that I haven't even set a value for this light parameter, I've just said light. If I remove that, it becomes no longer light. And I can actually pass any value I want for light. I can say light equals, flibit, digibit. And it does, the same thing. That's a word, right? Okay. Any other parameterizing I wanted to do? I don't think so. Okay, we'll move on to the next section. The next section has to do with how we send this input to pages. So obviously, we don't want users to just have to actually go up into the URL and type in these query strings manually. So how do these things appear? Well, we use what are called form controls, HTML form controls. The canonical example of this is just the text input box, like you use to search Google. This particular box right here is configured so that it'll send whatever information I type here to google.com/search. So if I say Black Raven, and I hit Booyah, it took me to this URL, google.com/search !Q equals Black Raven. And it did that just because that's what the browser is configured to do for form controls. An input element is, so the input tag is what's used to create this. But actually in HTML, the input tag is used to generate lots of different types of form control elements. We'll see a lot of those in a sec. So this input element is sort of overloaded to do a bunch of different things. To create a text area, we say input type equals text. To create a submit button, we type input type equals submit. And in the case of the submit button, we have the value equals Booyah. Value in this case is it shows it determines what text is shown on screen for the button. And in the case of the text input element, the way that we tell it what the name of the parameter is when we visit Google. So when we pass this information to Google, this is the name of the parameter that Google expects. This is what it looks for. This Q parameter, and its value is whatever we want to search for. So the way that we tell the browser to submit whatever we type here associated with the Q parameter is we say name equals Q. We also have a value here that specifies the default value, the default information in the box. If we don't change it, then its value will be just Colbert report. If we do change it, then it'll be whatever we change it to. Yeah.
How does this affect native link to
I think that's on the next slide. Good question. So the type can be any of these here: button, checkbox, file, hidden, password, radio, reset, submit, and text. And we'll go through all or most of these today. So text field, input type equals text. We also have input type equals password, is very similar. This is the one where it obscures whatever you type in. You can specify, if you want to specify a width in characters, use size. If you want to specify a maximum number of characters you can enter, you can use max length. But both of these are sort of, if you specify size, then if you use the width property of CSS, then you override that. I don't really use size anymore, I just use the CSS width property. With max length, that's not a very safe limitation, so because I can just use like Firebug to go in and like remove the max length and just enter my own value if I want to before I submit the page. So this isn't a very robust enforcement of a maximum number of characters. So if I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it doesn't allow me to type 9. But I can actually inspect this thing. I can just remove the max length parameter. Remove the max length parameter, and now I can type 9. Right? So this isn't a very robust enforcement. Other input attributes are disabled. You can disable something if I set the disabled property to be disabled. So let's see. Add HTML. We'll add disabled equals disabled. And all of a sudden this, I can't click on this, I can't actually enter text here. Value equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. That provides the default value, and the fact that it's disabled means I can't click on it, can't edit it. Text area, this is a larger text input area. This is something where you would like compose email at Gmail or something. And it requires you to specify a number of rows and columns. By default, most browsers render this in a pre-formatted, what's the word I'm looking for, monospaced font. The normal text area is just a single line, and if you type in more than its width, then it'll just sort of scroll to the left and right. But one of these allows you to scroll up and down too. Checkboxes, input type equals checkbox. So this allows me to select multiple of these elements individually. If I submit this form is actually configured to, right, let me just make sure I have the actual form stuff in the slide. I don't. Where did it go? I'm missing some slides that answer your question. Okay, I'm missing the form slide. I will have to find that, and I will we'll talk about that in a sec. So this form right here is configured to submit to a testing program that we have set up on Webster, webster.cs.washington.edu/params.php. And what this does is just sort of a debugging tool. If you configure your form to submit to that, it'll output whatever parameters were passed to it. So in this case, I'm selecting lettuce, but and pickles, but I'm not selecting tomato. And when I submit the query, it submits it to params.php, and we can see the parameters that were passed to it, lettuce equals on, pickles equals on, and it tells me what was output for get, or what it received for get, and it'll show me a bunch of other stuff that we'll take a look at later at different points later on in the quarter. So this is something useful to make sure that that your parameters are getting passed properly. Let's talk about forms. I don't know why I'm missing the form slide, but we'll go ahead and create one. What I want to do is I want to create an order form, and so this order form is going to allow me to pass the parameters to beer.php. So this beer.php, let's close the other stuff. Beer.php, this is the page where I have some stuff parameterized. And what I want to do is I want to create a form that when I submit it, it will take me to beer.php with the appropriate parameters passed. So I'm going to say beer order form. Okay, and the way that I tell the browser that I want these the data associated with these input elements to be submitted to beer.php is I use what's called a form. It's just the tag is called form, and it takes one parameter, action equals, and the value for this is the page that the browser should submit the data to. So before, in the example before, it was google.com/search. Okay. In the second example, it was webster.cs.washington.edu/params.php. But in this example, we're going to be sending it to beer.php. It's in the same directory, so I don't need to specify any other portions of the URL. It's just going to submit to beer.php, and any form control elements that we have on this page will translate into parameters being passed to that. So let's do a couple of things. Let's make another parameter here. Maybe I want to say that our favorite type of beer is something. So we'll declare a value up here, favorite, and we'll do the same sort of thing that we do over here. If is set favorite, then I'm going to get that parameter, favorite, fave equals there we go. So we can pass a parameter if we want to specify our favorite, and then maybe we'll include that in our welcome message. Welcome, you are the visitor, numph visitor to this page. Our favorite beer is, and then fave. Okay. So I can, inside of this form element, I can type an input element. In order to make it a text input area, I say type equals text. And I'm just going to leave it there for now. Let's load that page up. So that is order.html. Okay. I should put a label next to that so I know what I'm supposed to enter. What is your favorite beer? Okay. I will say, type of beer. Type of beer. Cascadian Dark Ale. Okay. I don't have a submit button here, but actually one thing about forms is that if you're inside of a text input area and you hit enter, oftentimes it'll translate that into a submit event. So when I did that, okay, so our favorite beer is Belgian Quadruple. Okay, quadruple. I don't see any parameters up here. What's going on? What happened? So, well, it sent us to beer.php, and we specified to send it to beer.php, to send the data to beer.php. But no parameters are being passed. Why are no parameters being passed? So there's something that we're forgetting in this input element. It's not value. It's actually, so the fact that we haven't given this a name means that it doesn't know what, so it's got a value in it. We entered some text in there and that becomes the value, but it doesn't know what name to associate with that value. So we have to specify explicitly a name parameter. Name equals fave. So on the other side, we made it look for the fave parameter, so we're going to specify fave here. So now when we, I sound like I'm from the Midwest. Now when I specify Cascadian Dark Ale and we hit enter, now it actually includes the fave equals Cascadian Dark Ale. And oh, it didn't show up there. It still says Belgian Quad, but let's. Oh, we didn't make it say fave. We made it say favorite. So we'll make it say fave instead. Fave. If you refresh that, excellent. Now it says Cascadian Dark Ale. Okay. Did you have a separate question? I saw your hand up before I actually called on you. The form control elements, yes, they are in input type equals, sorry, they are hybrid block inline elements. So like input type equals text, input type equals radio, checkbox, submit, those sorts of things. They're all inline elements, hybrid inline block elements. The form itself, the form tag itself is just a block element. Okay, let's do a little bit more parameterizing here. So we've got our favorite type of beer. I'm going to put this in a paragraph there. And then we'll do another one. How about, so we have a number of bottles parameter, so let's do that one. So number of bottles to order, input, type equals text, name equals bottles is the name of our parameter, right? And if we want to specify a default, we can specify 99 for here. Actually, let's make it 101 just so that we can be sure that it's different from the default on the other side. The default in the PHP is 99 if we don't pass a parameter. We want to make sure that we do pass a parameter. So we can have the default value there. Maybe a default value for here, American IPA. So these two things will show, we need a submit button too. So input type equals submit. I don't need typically you don't need a name for the submit button because you don't really need the submit button to come across in the query string parameter. So I'm just going to say, you know, order my beer. Okay, so now we have a submit button. The default values that I specified with the value parameter are here. I can also specify, this is sort of a newer thing, I can also specify what's called a placeholder. Placeholder equals enter beer here. Placeholder equals number of bottles. So if I refresh the page, actually that might conflict with value. there we go. Enter beer here, number of bottles. So I can say American IPA 101. Submit. Fave equals American IPA bottles equals 101. And then down here we can see that it's switched from 99 to 101. Okay. You can also, yeah.
I'm wondering, for all the information that's in the consent, is there how you set up the information to persist?
This is all temporary. This is all, that's a good question. He said, how do you set it up to persist? We're not saving any of this information in a file. You can link to this page. If you just copy the URL to this page, and if you link to this page, anytime you visit this page, it'll always say exactly what this exact output. So in that sense, it's sort of, it's not permanent, but it's deterministic. You always know what the output of this page is going to be, as long as you know, we don't change the way the page works. But no, there's nothing that's permanent about any of this. It doesn't. We're not saving any information to any files, and really, like the fact that this information is something that the page requests in order to provide the appropriate content. So there isn't really anything that we would want to save. The page is always requesting information in order to determine its output. Yeah.
Okay, so for other situations like
Mm-hmm.
visitors,
So if we were to actually do the number of visitors, that's a good question. We could do, let's see, let's actually do that. We could actually save that in a file. Let's create a new file. This is the folder. Okay, let's create a new file there. We're going to call it visitors.txt. Oops. TXT. And we're going to say 0. And then what we'll do is we'll say, instead of doing this, let's say that, so I'm going to say visitors num equals file get contents visitors.txt visitor +1. Then I'm going to write out to that same file put contents visitors.txt visitor num. And now what I've done is I've loaded the file, I've added 1 to it, and then I've written that new value out to the same file. So yeah, so this is persistent now, and this is actually real. So if I refresh this page, welcome, you are the refresh 1th visitor. I'm refreshing and it's not updating. Output contents. Visitors.txt. Did I get the order of the parameters wrong here? PHP.net file put contents. File name data, okay, so that's right. I must not have write permissions for this. Let's go back and set write permissions on this. Visitors.txt, I'm just going to get info on this and set it, here we go. So I'm going to set it so that everybody can read and write to it on my file system, because the web server program runs as a particular user on my system, which is not me. So it runs on as a different user. So now I should, there we go. You're the 2th visitor, the 3rd, and 4th, and so on. And of course, if we wanted to be really nice about it, we would adjust the ordinal there, but that's fine. Okay, one more. So checkboxes, we want to do a checkbox for light or not light beer. P, do you want light beer? Input type equals checkbox. Name equals light. That's the name of the parameter that we're looking for on the other side. So the thing about checkboxes is if we don't specify a value, it'll say, I believe the default is on. It just says on, O-N is the value for it. And that's good enough for us for this. Because on the other side, all we're doing is we're saying light. Where's light? It's in the header.php. We're saying light if it is set, which it means if it has any value at all, including, by the way, false, F-A-L-S-E is just a string that says F-A-L-S-E. 0 is just a number, but it's truthy, or it exists. So this will exist. This will evaluate to true. So any value, it can be any value at all, including nothing. And then so maybe we want to prevent that from happening. So we'll just say disabled, because we don't want people to order light beer. You want light beer? Oh, I do, but I can't check it. Oh, well, I guess I have to have not light beer. Okay. Well, okay, let's actually do that so we can test it. Light beer, check. Excellent. And then last thing I want to do maybe is I want to specify a different type of I want to specify so that instead of bottles in our club song, we can specify different types of containers. So maybe like a can, or a bottle, or a keg, or a growler, or what's the small growler? I just started to see these the smaller growlers. They have a cute name. What are they called? Anybody know? It's like a snarler or something. It's like a small growler. It's funny. Okay, so let's do a different type of container. So type of container. And for this, we're going to have a couple of different radio buttons. In order to do radio buttons, as you probably know, they select between a mutually exclusive set of things. So I can only select one of these things. So let's do a couple of radio buttons. Radio. So let's do that. Type was radio, radio, radio. So maybe we'll have like can, bottle, keg, growler. Oops, growler. Okay. So in order to make these a mutually exclusive set, I have to give them all the same name. So we want, for a single parameter, we want one of these values. So we have to give them all the same name. So I'm going to give them all the same name. Name equals container. And we also, this is sort of a common error, we also have to give them all a value. Value equals something. And so can, bottle, keg, growler. You might think that, okay, well, I've already said can over here. Why do I need to say can over here? Anybody know the answer to that? If I don't put can here, what will happen? It won't show up. So let's go look at the output of this page. Okay, so I deleted can, and there's nothing next to this radio button here. But there's stuff next to bottle and keg. So these two are both necessary. So this can right here is actually, like, semantically, technically, it's not even associated with this radio button. It's just text that happens to be next to this radio button. And we associate them visually, but there's nothing that explicitly associates this can with this radio button. So we have to explicitly say that if I select this particular input, it's the value associated with the container parameter should be can. And same thing for the rest of these. there's actually a way that we can more explicitly associate these things together, and that's with a label tag. The label tag sort of says that, so if I'm back here, if I try to click on MasterCard or American Express or Visa, then it doesn't do anything, right? It's just plain text. I have to actually click on the radio button itself. But if I wrap the two of them, the input and this text next to it, in a label tag, then it explicitly associates that text with that radio button, so it sort of transfers the click to that radio button, which is a much nicer thing to do in terms of usability. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap all of these in a label. Each of these individually so that they'll transfer the click nicely. Okay, so now can, bottle, keg, growler. If I want to specify a default for one of these, I can say, let's see, so maybe I'll say the default is bottle. Checked equals checked. That's how I specify that it should be default. If I refresh, or if I do a hard refresh, then, so oftentimes with forms, browsers will sort of save values that you entered previously. Even if you refresh the page, it'll pre-populate it with something you previously entered. What I just did is, instead of a Command R or a Control R in Windows, I did Command Shift R or Control Shift R. That does what's called a hard refresh. It refreshes the entire page and puts all of the default values for each form field. Okay, so we're going to leave most of these as the default. We're just going to switch this to keg. So none of the parameters up here actually have any values, but keg, it was passed for container. I'm going to go ahead and, so our club song is now broken actually, because we need to actually explicitly specify number of bottles, so we'll do that, and then foo, no light beer, okay. Okay, so what I want to do is switch this from bottles to keg in that case. So we'll just go up here and we'll say container equals, we're going to have to do the same thing as this. If is set get container, this will be container sorry, say that again. Yeah, so that's a really good point. So a lot of this stuff is very redundant. We're doing a lot of the same thing. If this parameter is set, then get its value. Otherwise, use this default. So this is actually a common thing in PHP. It's a very common thing to write a function to do this. So that's probably something we should do. We'll do that next time. For now, we'll just make sure this container thing works. Container 99, oh, we need to specify down there. So we set the value. Now we need to go down here and say, instead of bottles, containers of beer on the wall. Container. And there we go. Your third homework is up. Go ahead and check that out. It's built off of homework 2. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be parameterizing your page so that it'll work with multiple different movies. It's a pretty good one. It's a little bit easier than the last one. The last one was kind of tough. So go ahead and check that out, and I'll see you guys. We'll see you in lab tomorrow, and I'll see you on Friday.
What's that? Yeah, I have to grab some.
I was thinking maybe, I don't know, how
Tonight? If you wanna stop by, that'd be awesome.
I mean, it would be easier if I could see something.